Okay, so we got a turning point. That's another one. Okay, now when I set up, so I'm setting my gun up. I got a sight benchmark back here. I got a piece of, or a foundation I want to put in over here. Set up the gun. I look through the gun and I look at the rod. I'm looking back at something that I know. I know the elevation. This would be on the drawing. Okay? I know the elevation. So if I'm looking at something I know, back at something I know, is called a BS, back sight. I want to set the elevation of the foundation. I turn the gun around and I look and I set the elevation of the foundation. I'm setting something. I'm setting something that I don't know. That's called a foresight. FS. A back sight and a foresight. Off of the back sight, I can get the height of instrument. Elevation of the instrument. Height of instrument. Okay, and if you need these are on page 7.3 of your text. BM, BS, HI, turning point, closed loop. They missed one that I'll catch later. It's called a side shot or an intermediate foresight. We'll get into that in a little bit. But those are the basic terms you need to know. Okay, to do that, let me see. We're going to do a real simple one, then I'm going to change it from just visual inspection and calculation. We're going to change it to a set of notes, field notes. So this little guy looks like this. There's the ground. Okay. Okay, we've got a sight benchmark or a benchmark. It's elevation of 531.49. That's the given. That would be given in the problem. Okay, we want to find the elevation at turning point 2. It's too far to look. I can't sit in the middle and look both directions. It's too far. So I'm going to set a turning point. Okay, and do that. This is what I do. This is the rod. The rod is set right here on that particular. So a guy would be holding the rod straight up and down. The instrument man would be behind the instrument looking through. He'd set up, he'd look through the scope, and he'd come over here and he'd read a number. And according to this problem, that number is 1.27. Okay? The rodman would grab his rod, hold on to it, walk by the instrument man, come to turning point 1 and stand the rod up. The instrument man would turn the scope of the gun and look through and read a shot. And that shot was 4.91. Okay, now that'll give me the elevation of turning point 1. The instrument man picks up his instrument, walks by the rodman. He's not sitting here anymore, he moves over here, about halfway in between. Sets up his gun, levels it, looks back, and reads the rod. And he reads 2.33. Okay? The rodman picks up his rod, walks by the instrument man, goes over to turning point 2, sets up his rod. Instrument man turns the gun, just swivels it around on the tripod, looks over, and he reads a number of 6.17. Okay? Now the question was, what is the elevation at TP2? So I want this elevation right here. Okay, let's see if this makes sense to you. This is a leapfrog. I start out with 531.49. How much do I add to that to get to where my eyes are or the height of the instrument? Does it make sense I add 1.27 feet? Hopefully it does. So if I add 1.27 feet, isn't that the elevation of that line right there? If that's the elevation of that line, isn't that the elevation of the height of the instrument? So the height of the instrument here is right there. Now I know the elevation of that line, right? If I want the elevation of TP1, doesn't it make sense that I drop 4.91 feet and I'll be back down to where I want to be? So I take the 532.76 and subtract 4.91. Does that look like a number that makes sense? So that is the elevation right here. So what did I do? I started out with a benchmark. I added 1.27 and I subtracted 4.91. This 1.27, I'm looking back over something that I know. That's the backside. 4.91, I'm over the top of something I don't know. That's a foresight. Now I move down, instrument man moves over, and I know this elevation, so if I take 527.85, I add 2.33 to it. It looks like I'm at 530.18. So the HI then is 530.18. Now if I want to get back down to TP2, I subtract them. I'm at 5 2401. And that is so what did I do the same thing? I think I did. If I had an elevation of 527.85, I go up 2.33. So I'm adding to get my height to my eyes, go across, subtract down. And now, once I've done this side, this becomes a known, so that's a back sight. And that's an unknown, that's a foresight. So what does that mean? It looks like if I take the benchmark, I add the back sight to it, I get the HI, and if I subtract the foresight from it, I get a new elevation. That's all I do. Benchmark, add, across, subtract. Benchmark, add, across, subtract. That's all we're doing. We're measuring from a line in the sky. The line in the sky is the height of the instrument, and I'm just going up and down from that. So you can see the process. Now, if I had to set up the notes in the field to give to someone in the office that would make sense to them, I would do this. And this is going to be pretty universal. We're going to add one more column later, but this is pretty universal. Okay. That's pretty universal as far as we're going to add one more column between the FS and the elevation when it's all said and done. But for this problem, this is all we need. Okay, here's how we do it. Station, that's where we're at. I just go through and I look at them. First one is BM. Second one is TP1. Third one is TP2. That's all the stations I got, right? Takes care of everything. Okay, I've given the elevation of the benchmark. Benchmark, elevation. That makes sense so far? Okay, if that does, then here's my readings. How do I know where to put it? The benchmark, I'm looking at the benchmark. It's a back sight. Benchmark, back sight. Next one, I turn the instrument. I'm looking at TP1. It's a foresight. TP1, foresight. Make sense? Okay, next one I move past. I'm looking at TP1 back sight. I'm here, looking at TP1 back sight. And now I turn and I'm looking at TP2 foresight. So all you got to do is look at where you're looking at and what type of shot it is. Are you looking in front of yourself or behind? And there's the numbers. Now, look at how I put those in. It doesn't quite make a lot of sense. I'm not going from left to right. This was given. First number I put in was that. Now you think you'd put that one in next. Well, you don't. That goes in next. Then back. So you're in a kind of a crisscross pattern. You just got to be aware of where you're at and what you're looking at. You just don't go in and grab a hole and throw a number in it, because you're going to have a screwed up mess. Okay, now with that, how do I do the math? Well, I try to picture that in my head. Okay, if I picture that in my head, this is what I'd be doing. I'd be taking the benchmark, I'd be adding 1.27 to it. That column's a plus. It's always going to be added. And then I'd get this. Then I subtract this one from it. That column's always going to be a negative. And when I do that, I end up with now notice that is the elevation at TP1. Okay? Then I do one more thing and the pattern remains constant. Okay? If you get the pattern, you got it. Now I take this elevation. I add that to it. And what do I get? I get this number right here. And that number is 530.18. Then I subtract that one from it. Now I'm done. So you see, it's not numbers straight across. If you can visualize this, you got the world by the tail. If you can't visualize it, the process is over, add, down, across. Over, add, down, across. Over, add, down, across. Okay? So it gets to be a little confusing, especially when you're out in the field for the first few times. But look at these titles. These titles are going to tell you where the number goes. And then visualize it, and it should give you an idea of how do you add or subtract. This column's always going to be adding. This column's always going to be subtracting. Okay, one last thing with this simple one. If I want to know if I've screwed up the math, okay, this is what I do. Starting elevation. Plus sum of the back sights minus sum of the foresights equals the ending elevation.